You're listening to Trek FM.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
There was a little bar in Mill Valley where all the Starfleet trainees used to go.
The 602 Club.
You know it.
I was there more times than I can remember.
If the Empire has this kind of power, what chance do we have?
What chance do we have? The question is, what choice? Run, hide, plead for mercy, scatter your forces. You give way to an enemy this evil with this much power, and you condemn the galaxy to an eternity of submission. The time to fight is now!
Welcome, everyone, to Trek FM's dedicated General Geek Show. I'm just ecstatic to be here with you. It's going to be a fantastic show. Last show of 2016. If you're listening to this in perpetuity, you can just ignore that. We're excited to be here tonight to dive into what's going to be, I guess, a brand new holiday tradition, a Star Wars special every single year. I mean, just a Star Wars film. I guess they don't really want us thinking about the Star Wars special, but we're going to be talking about Rogue One tonight, and I can't wait to dive in with some incredible gentlemen. I have with me for the very first time in the 602 Club, the one, the only Brandon-Shea Mutala.
I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I'm one with the Force, and the Force is with me.
He's praying like that's going to help him on the show.
He'll learn.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, welcome, man. It's great to have you. I'm so excited that you're here to talk about this. And as well, it is in the bylaws of the 602 Club. He's broken it a few times, but he's back. The one and only John Mills.
Yeah, I figured I'd come on back and dust off the old chair. Don't want my groove getting worn out by being absent for too long. So just settling in and looking forward to a nice conversation with you, gentlemen.
Well, he's grabbed his calf and he's here for a great conversation. Bruce Gibson.
Hello, thank you for having me. Excuse me, I saw a gorilla in my throat there for a second.
Deceit!
Hey, it's great to be here. This is great. I didn't even realize it was Brandon's first 602 Club. That's amazing.
It is.
I know, isn't that awesome? That's awesome. Well, guys, it's going to be a fantastic show. Before we dive into what will, I'm sure, be a riveting conversation for everybody as we dive into the brand new Star Wars movie by Gareth Edwards, make sure you check out every show on Trek FM over at itunes.com/Trek FM. We are a featured provider. You can find all of our shows there. And while you're there, really would appreciate it this holiday season if you would hit us up with some star ratings and reviews. Those will help the show grow. And I really do appreciate everyone who spends the few minutes to be able to do that. It's wonderful. You can find us on Twitter at Trek FM, Facebook at facebook.com/Trek FM. Of course, we've got our listeners-only discussion group that each one of these gentlemen is a part of. You can find that on Facebook. Just type Babel into the search field on Facebook, or if you are on our website at trek.fm, click discussion on any of the menu bars. Write us an email at trek.fm/contact. Just choose a show, choose the 602 Club, and that comes directly to us. And last but not least, voicemails. Go to speakpipe.com/Trek FM. And leave us a voicemail about what you thought about Rogue One, and we might just play it on the show. So, gentlemen, last year was an interesting thing as we all experienced the first Star Wars film in a long time, continuing the episodes. So we got episode 7, and we all kind of approached that in different ways, and this being a new thing for Star Wars. We're doing a film that doesn't have an episode number. It's just a story, a Star Wars story. And I wanted to ask how you guys were feeling going in, and what did you do, if anything, to prepare? What about you, Brandon?
So I went into this one very cautiously because the last few movies that I've gone to see for my fandom with Star Trek and with The Force Awakens, I've really actually been quite let down when I left them. Like, I was not a fan of The Force Awakens at all, and I was not a fan of Star Trek Beyond. They just didn't work for me. They didn't hit me right in the heart where they used to. And jumping in, so I was kind of cautious when I went to the movie theater to see this one. But I was still excited because the trailers that I'd seen had really piqued my interest, and the special effects were looking really good. So I tried to stay away from spoilers. I tried to go in clean. And so that's kind of how I took the approach of going into the movie.
What about you, John? Because for you, I know you had a very different outlook for what you did for this film as opposed to last year.
Yeah, I decided to do a little science experiment, and instead of immersing myself in Star Wars in the lead up to things, I purposely recused myself from the Star Wars universe for about a month or so beforehand. I muted everything I possibly could, including just any mentions of Star Wars at all on social media. I avoided any trailers or promos like the plague. I mean, I did effectively go on a blackout where I just didn't see or hear anything going into it. And I even chose not to read Catalyst, which was the tie-in book leading into it. And that was because I wanted to see if it affected my outlook or reception of the movie the first time through. And I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out whether it did have any sort of impact on my reaction to the film. But yeah, that was how I prepped for it, was by not prepping for it.
What about you, Bruce?
Well, I was totally opposite from John in this case. And it all starts in Anaheim at Celebration in 2015 when they brought Gareth Edwards out. They showed us a little teaser for Rogue One. It wasn't any footage from the film. It was just specifically made as a teaser for the attendees there. And then, of course, I went to Celebration in London where we saw the whole cast. And then since that point on, I've been following all the trailers, all the footage, all the news. I read Catalyst. And one reason is because I'm executive producer of the Star Wars Report, so I have to follow all these things so we can discuss these things on the show. So I knew a lot going in. I even talked to people who were at some of the press screenings and got some information from them. So when I walked in, I knew exactly, for the most part, what I was going to get. And yes, Catalyst was a great read going into this movie. It gave a lot of back information on Krennic and Galen Erso and his family, including Jyn. So I thought that was really helpful too.
I'm a little bit in the middle. I didn't watch everything. In fact, there came a point after that second trailer came out, I didn't watch anything else. I tried not to. I even buzzed through, on our DVR, I would buzz through the commercials already, but I would admit, if it was a Rogue One commercial, I was trying to skip it. I just didn't want to see stuff because I got to the point where, okay, I already want to see the movie. I just don't really want to know more. I did read Catalyst, but I don't think that book did anything other than support the film. It didn't take away from the film, I don't think. I think it only just added to characters and motivations and things like that. It did exactly what tie-in books should do, which was enhance, I think, the film. And so that's really the biggest thing I did. But I'll tell a funny story. John, you'll remember this. Remember when the trailer came out for Rogue One, and I wrote you a text, and I was like, I don't like it.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yes.
I don't like this.
Yeah.
And it was my first reaction to the very first trailer that they released. And part of it was that trailer just had this interesting feeling. I don't know, something about it just didn't click right away, like the first time I watched it. I don't know, maybe I thought it was like going to be Hunger Games for Star Wars kind of thing. I don't know. And I watched it a few more times, and I started to fall in love with it. And then the moment that we learned that Forrest Whitaker's character was Saw Gerrera, everything changed for me personally. Because just for me, it meant that they were taking Star Wars very seriously, and all of Star Wars, not just, the original trilogy, but they cared about, at least that's what it told me, they cared about the Clone Wars and Rebels and the prequel trilogy. Like, everything was important to them. And from that moment on, I was a champion of the film in the sense of I wanted to see it. I was super excited. And everything in the second trailer came out, I loved that. So That's how I came into this. I was like, I'm really excited. I was actually way more excited for this film than I was for The Force Awakens by the time the movie actually came out, just because of what I was seeing was hitting every single button just that I have for what I would hope there would be in a new Star Wars movie. So, yeah, that's where I came in. What were your and we'll dive into the movie, but what ended up being your first impressions after your first viewing? We'll start with you, John.
Well, my first impressions were, and I did I talked about this with another Trek FM host, Mike Schindler. We were talking about it on Great Shot Kid, and I was a little bit put off by the beginning of it. I felt it was choppy and jumped around a bit too much. But I thought that once it settled in, I got invested in it and I enjoyed it. And then I thought that the big final battle at the end basically wiped away a lot. Any of the technical things I would have quipped about get wiped away by the final act, the big battle and everything, because I thought that was just absolutely riveting and incredibly edited and paced and scored and everything about it, down to the sound design and everything. And then leading up to the very end, I was with it, and there was one special part, and until you say we're doing spoilers on this, I'm not going to spoil anything. But then there was one part that actually made me laugh out loud in the theater like a psychopath, I guess, because I knew what was about to happen. And because I'd been on a complete blackout of information, it took me completely by surprise. And I just started laughing, and I said, okay, I'm going to enjoy this. I know that. So I walked out of it, and I was, my opinion of it didn't settle in until I took my kid to see it on Friday night, because I saw it first on Thursday, then I saw it on Friday, and my opinion settled down, and I do enjoy it a great deal.
Brandon?
As soon as I sat down and started watching this movie, again, I went in very, very kind of pessimistic because of the last couple of movies that just really didn't hit it out of the park for me. But watching this movie and going through it, everything was just making me excited. And as the film kept building, as it kept going along, I felt like these people truly cared, like you were saying earlier, that they truly cared about the history of Star Wars. And the look and the feel of this combined, so much modern special effects with past special effects to give it such an interesting look. And it just kept getting me more and more excited as I watched this movie. And I wasn't quite sure what to expect out of all of it, again, because I went in pretty dark as well. But yeah, all I can say is that when I left the movie theater, I was excited. I was talking with my friends, because we saw it on Thursday night with two friends of mine. I was talking. I'm like, oh, remember that scene? I love this part. This part was great. That part was awesome. And I have not left a movie excited since The Dark Knight. It's been a really long time since I've been absolutely blown away by a franchise that I love.
Mr. Gibson.
Well, I walked out very pleased with the movie. I walked out liking it a little better than I thought I would. Again, I felt like I knew what I was going to get in this film, which it did meet those expectations, but I enjoyed it even more than I thought. So I really relate this a lot to my experience with The Force Awakens, which I love that movie. When I came out of The Force Awakens, I was kind of numb. I had to kind of process it. I knew I liked it, but I really had to think it through, and I had to see it again. When I saw Rogue One, I came out, and I didn't feel like I had to process it that much. I knew right away that I liked it, and I think what I figured out was the fact that this seemed, with The Force Awakens, they were playing it a little safe, and they were trying to start a new chapter in the Star Wars universe, so I was trying to learn how to accept that. With this one, this felt like a love letter to A New Hope. And so it was so readily easy for me to accept it and really enjoy it, because there was just so many great little moments in there that were just a celebration of the Star Wars franchise and that first movie. So there was so much afterwards that I was talking with friends about. And And what you guys are saying is just like, going back and forth and saying like, oh, I love this part. Oh, that was really cool and everything like that. So I was very happy coming out.
There is one thing that I will do my best not to do in this. I want to take this movie specifically by itself, so my goal is to not compare it to The Force Awakens. Coming out of this film, I knew I loved it. I just loved this movie. And it was because, for me, this is everything I want in a brand new Star Wars film. It's just everything I want. The respect for everything that's come before, with the infusement of something that feels fresh and new, but at the same time feeling familiar. Like it's everything that Star Wars at its best has always been. It's the thing that made Empire Strikes Back so good. It felt like Star Wars, but it was moving in another direction, and then I think for me the prequel trilogy did that too, and then I feel like the Clone Wars series did that, and so I'd really responded to that, and this was not something I had to think about, or because there were moments legitimately, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, but that I was doing the same thing you were, John. There was like screaming, like laughing out loud with joy, like, oh, I can't believe that just happened, or I just saw this, or and just all of that kind of stuff that happened throughout this movie for me led to just basically geek joy.
Something a thought that occurred to me after the first time I saw it and really stuck with me after the second time was this thought that I think that in the fan base, especially the hardcore fan base, from my perspective, it's going to resonate very strongly, because I would say that this is the movie in a lot of ways that people wanted or expected to see in 1999. I'm not talking about seeing a war movie or anything like that, but something where there was such a strong connective tissue with what had been established before in terms of, not tenuous story points or allusions to things, but direct, this thing that I just watched, I know exactly where this is going to tie into the next one. And so lining up in that fashion. Do you think that sort of connection is what's helping it, sort of resonate very strongly with a lot of fans?
I would think so. Honestly, like that's one of the things that resonated the most with me, is it really, really, really felt like a part of the original trilogy. The way that the ships were, right, that Star Destroyer, and how white it was, right? Like that's something right from A New Hope. And going in and like, so the people that we see and the characters that we meet, they all feel like they belong in that original trilogy.
Yeah, it almost felt like a lost movie that we found in a vault somewhere from 1977 in a sense, because there's just so much connective tissue to A New Hope. And it really it probably is more of what we were expecting back in the late 90s going into the prequels, of having it really connect with the original trilogy. And since the prequels are so much earlier in the timeline and took a different tone and a different way of playing out those films, it didn't quite resonate with traditional hardcore Star Wars fans and even casual fans probably at that moment. So this one actually really does. And I was talking before the show that I feel like from people I've talked to, those who are casual fans of Star Wars seem to like The Force. I'm keep going back to The Force Awakens. I'm sorry, but they like The Force Awakens better, and then the hardcore fans, Star Wars fans, seem to like Rogue One better. That's what I'm finding out so far.
I think there's part of that, John. Possibly. I also think that this movie feels like a reward. For if you've been a fan for a long time and you've enjoyed all of Star Wars, this one feels like a reward, because it's the linchpin that connects all the PT, all the Clone Wars, all of the Rebels episodes that you've watched to A New Hope. It brings, it puts everything together. It really is the linchpin in the series, where all that came before and all that goes after that all flow through this funnel, and I think it really does. It just feels like a reward for fandom. And I think In a lot of ways, I feel like Gareth Edwards seemed to approach it that way too. That you should be rewarded for all those things that you've seen, you know. And we're gonna try and make as much of it that makes sense for our story fit together with what you know. And we'll throw in some fun things too, like okay, here's where the spoilers start. We're gonna throw in Ponda Bata and Dr. Cornelius just for the hell of it because it's hilarious.
Okay, but just to, that's sort of one of the things where I find it interesting. I don't, I'm not like passing judgment. And like I think that we're all trying our best not to like draw any comparisons to like Force Awakens or anything, but at the same time, I think it's inescapable because it's only been 12 months. I think if this was like 3 years later, it'd be like we would, wouldn't be as fresh in our minds, and because the experience would have faded for us. But I found, and I'm not knocking them. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I thought there were just as many callbacks in this as there were in Force Awakens. But I've experienced people, including myself at first, who rejected those callbacks much more strongly than the callbacks in this. And I find that interesting. Is that just because it was framed differently or because it was a different type of callback? The thing is, again, I'm not saying like I disliked what they did. I'm just saying like I'm trying to figure out why one worked and one didn't.
God, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do this, but I think you're right. We'll just talk about it. Compare the two, like, or not compare, but like, what is it that maybe works for some for people in this one that didn't work in the Force Awakens, or vice versa? If there's anything let's go there. I mean, I think that's a great discussion.
See, I'm having trouble with that in my mind because when I watched The Force Awakens, I think we have to compare them. When I watched The Force Awakens, the callbacks didn't feel right to me, and they do feel right in this movie. And for 3 days now, I've been trying to figure out what the difference is. Why does one work? Because, like, jumping at the end, like the battle at the end feels like Return of the Jedi in this movie a lot, right? And there's basically it feels like A New Hope in The Force Awakens because it's a Death Star, but not the Death Star. Right. And here it is, the actual Death Star coming in, and it kind of feels like Return of the Jedi as well. Why am I okay with one and not the other? I don't know. I've been struggling with that for 3 days. But I loved the callbacks in this. I loved the little things that you see. I loved the blue milk on the table from the moisture farm that the guy's running at the beginning. And the fact that his wife is wearing basically what Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen are wearing. They're not on Tatooine, but she's even got basically the same outfit that they have.
Well, Brandon, I think it's what you said earlier. This whole film is a callback. It's a callback to the original trilogy. It's in that time frame. So this is the original trilogy now is 4 movies in some senses. So the whole movie is a callback. So those callbacks within a movie in this time frame just seem to feel like they belong because we're in the right time when these events are occurring. If you look at The Force Awakens, which is 30 years later, it's a little different. We're in a different time frame. We have different characters. There's different events. It's a new chapter. This is going back to the old chapters. So there's a retro feeling to that. And so the callbacks in a retro movie just seem to fit much better and feel more exciting to me.
So now we can call this the original quadrilogy instead of the original trilogy.
You just called it.
The OQ.
I mean, I guess for me, the thing that I get, if I were to say I get hung up on one of them, it is that Ponda Baba thing, them being in Jeddah right before A New Hope when they're going to be on Tatooine. And again, we're still in spoiler territory, right?
Oh, the rest of this show is completely
because I guess they were just leaving Jeddah at the time because Jeddah gets wiped out, and so they're there right before Jeddah gets wiped out, and they happen to go to Tatooine. That was the one that sort of spurred the whole question for me. It's just one of those things where that was the one that jumped out. And the thing is, I'm not trying to I'm just trying to compare the devices, like you said, Brandon. not just for me, but I'm trying to figure out why. And I think you guys have done a good job of like explaining it. Like it makes sense to me. The callbacks in this one are more, for lack of a better term, more acceptable because it's taking place at that time, as opposed to something that's set further in the future. And so maybe the callbacks don't feel as genuine, or they feel too grafted on for whatever reason. It is sort of what, and if that's why it's working for one and not the other, I get that. I can understand that.
I also think that George definitely mimics himself, mirrors himself in the PT trilogy with the original trilogy. But the films are structured different, and they're mimicking different types of cinema, as George loved to do. He would pull in a type of cinema, and he would tell a Star Wars story in that type of cinema and make it feel Star Wars. So it felt fresh and familiar all at the same time. And I think Gareth Edwards does exactly the same thing, because he's pulling in the war film genre, specifically just the war film, and turning that into a Star Wars war film, even though it's been called Star Wars forever. And when he does something that feels familiar to Star Wars, it doesn't feel just like an outright copy, because he's pulling it into the war film genre. Does that make sense? So, like, you're right, Brandon. The end of this film is specifically because Gareth Edwards wanted it. He wanted that 3-act structure of the fight, where there's 3 different aspects happening, just like George would do specifically in Return of the Jedi, where there's 3 different battles happening, and you're intercutting between them. That was on purpose. I was reading the art of Rogue One today, and he wanted that to happen specifically. But I think it just feels different because the film itself is a war movie that also happens to be a Star Wars film. I think The Force Awakens was a Star Wars movie that was copying Star Wars things. And there wasn't another layer. Like, The Attack of the Clones is a noir film, the detective noir film and political thriller set in the Star Wars universe. So you have a completely different style, and then when you pull some of those Star Wars things in, for some reason they feel fresher. Does that make sense?
I'm glad you're saying this, because it's true, because the Force Awakens, again, comparing, but The Force Awakens is looking at Star Wars. This movie is in the Star Wars universe. It's looking at Star Wars, but it's trying to be a war movie. It's not trying to just be a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like this too easily turns into like a whole other debate, at least from my perspective, because like there's a whole like meta layer in The Force Awakens. It's called The Force Awakens because things have lain dormant and blah 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 and all like, and like that wasn't my intention of like going down, that road with the discussion. But I mean, like, I just I think that there was a challenge both on a meta level and on an audience access level that, I'll get straight to it. Like, Force Awakens, I could say to my in-laws, they're going to go see it and they're going to plug into it and they're going to have a great time and they're going to think it's wonderful. And they did. And they thought, they had so much fun watching it. And I was talking with my father-in-law tonight, who hasn't seen Rogue One yet. He said, "Hey, did you like the new Star Wars movie?" I said, "Yeah, I really did. It was a good time. I had a good time." He goes, "Will I like it?" And I was like, I kind of froze. And because I've asked myself that question since the first time I saw it. If somebody's not steeped in Star Wars, are they going to plug into this movie as easily as they did to last year's movie? And so
I think so.
You do?
Sorry. Oh, absolutely.
Really?
I think that you can totally come into this movie as completely fresh to the Star Wars universe, because the candy that's littered on the ground for the fans it's just there. It's a glittery thing that catches your eye, but there's so many characters that we've never seen before. We don't know any of these people. These are all brand new characters. Everybody knows who Darth Vader is, right? But nobody knows who. And I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names. Like I'm gonna do this a few times to you guys. I know you're more than names. The girl's name. The main
Jyn Erso.
character. Jyn. Okay, so nobody knows who Jyn is, and we get her entire story in this movie.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I'm saying from a level, like any of the previous 7, I think that somebody could come in cold and they're going to pick it up and they're just going to watch it and they're going to have a fine time with it. Whereas with this one, I don't think that this wouldn't be a movie that I would say to somebody, you can just watch this one and find out if you like Star Wars and come straight into it.
Oh wow! Yeah,
I don't think it would hook a cold audience member. I don't.
Kind of on your side on that, John. I guess I relate it to being a kid when Empire Strikes Back came out. I felt like so many people loved A New Hope, and then when The Empire Strikes Back came out, I thought it was brilliant. But a lot of the people at school, when I was in middle school, didn't like The Empire Strikes Back. Oh, it's darker. It's not as fun. And I'm like, to me, it was like, it's more. It's over the top. It's more dramatic. It's darker, but that's what makes it better. I almost feel like that's the play here, too. I think people like the general audience is like the more light and fun type of Star Wars movie. So if someone who isn't really into Star Wars or never seen Star Wars, I don't think I would start them with this one, but I would definitely recommend. I mean, if my dad asks me if he should see it, I'm going to tell him. But I don't know. I don't know. I think most people I'd probably not gravitate to that one.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I told my father-in-law that I think he should see it, and I think that he'd have fun watching it. But I'm just thinking in terms of an introduction story. Like, I don't know, that's sort of like the question that spins in my head. Is this a first one to drop somebody into the middle of? It doesn't mean it's bad or it's good. I'm just like that. It's just sort of like a tangential thought that occurs to me.
Well, and they might, even if it's their first one, they love it. They might not like the rest.
Right. This might be so different that they're like, what the hell? Why is that Darth Vader guy so important?
I totally think that this is cut from the same batter. This is a cake that's made from the same batter as A New Hope. And if you can come into The New Hope like without knowing anything else about Star Wars, I really think you can come into Rogue One without knowing anything about Star Wars and get the exact same thing out of it. I personally think so.
The thing that I personally feel, and this is just for me, is that this is quintessential Star Wars filmmaking and Star Wars filmmaking in the legacy of George Lucas, where especially after with the prequel trilogy and then with what he did in Clone Wars, everything was meant to stretch what it meant to be Star Wars without breaking the Star Wars mold. And George was always looking to do that. Sometimes and specifically just taking like the Clone Wars, sometimes it really works, and then sometimes they found out that it didn't. But that was okay. It was an experiment. The difference for me between this and The Force Awakens is that this is in that same experiment. We're going to push what it means to be Star Wars and see if we can still make it work. And I think it works absolutely brilliantly here. I just don't, I personally don't feel that with The Force Awakens because it's not a push. It's just a callback. And for me, that's not as rewarding. I'm not saying I don't like The Force Awakens at all and it's total crap. That's not what I'm saying at all. I enjoy that movie. I enjoy the fun characters and that kind of stuff, but it's more surfacey level, whereas this was it was everything that I appreciate most about when Star Wars is at its best. So, yeah, great question, though, John. I think it's definitely something you kind of have to ask because now we're getting a Star Wars movie every year. So you really can't do anything but kind of compare and contrast what works and what doesn't and why. So we've talked a few times, and so let's just dive into the new characters and start talking about these characters because there's a lot of them. And I wanted to ask you guys specifically about Jyn Erso and Felicity Jones because I think she has a really interesting storyline here where, she's somebody who starts with a home and somebody who ends with a home, and the middle is about her finding that home again. And she has a very interesting hero's journey which most good Star Wars movies do. And I wanted to see how that played out for you guys, if it works for you and for her character and for, Felicity Jones playing her.
Yeah, I thought that Jen Erso was a compelling, strong character. I enjoyed watching her. I thought she was performed well. I thought she was written well. And she seemed to have a good amount of free will about her instead of, we all know where this is going, but the way she was written and played, she still felt like she was a driver of her own story as opposed to a captive of it, which can be sometimes a criticism that is leveled toward the prequels, especially where it feels like everybody's just sort of chess pieces. And that's not a criticism I level, but I've heard people level that criticism. I would say that anybody who has that concern, Jin is a successful character because she is, master of her own destiny, and it feels like she drives the story as opposed to being driven by it. So I enjoyed her. I thought she was well done.
I think she's a great character as well. I think that maybe, her attitude changes a little bit abruptly in the story. Because I'm guessing that this movie's taking place in a pretty condensed period of time, right? But I do like her character growth and how her character changes. And it's like you say, she does take charge of her own storyline. She does become the leader. I just think it happens a little bit quickly in the story. That's the only criticism I would have about her storyline in it whatsoever. I personally think it's great to have a female protagonist. I've got young daughters, and I've been seeing online that there's a lot of people who seem frustrated with this, who don't seem to like it, but I don't understand that, especially in this day and age. I think she's a well-written character, except for the fact that her growth happens a little quickly.
I mean, I'm the same with you guys. I really enjoy her character. I think Felicity Jones did a great job. But I can say overall, and this is not just her character, but a lot of them, I didn't connect as much with the characters in this film as I have in other Star Wars films. In some ways, I think that's almost on purpose from the director's standpoint, because this is a one-shot, and this is really about the Alliance and the Rebels, and it's not as much of a character story. I think they're trying to do that with Jin for the most part, but sometimes I feel like the character development was a little rushed and a little lacking at times with some of the characters, just in general with all of them. But with Jin, I liked her. If they were going to make another movie with Jin Erso, I'd want to see it, but I did like her.
I'd like to see them figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
It's a prequel to Rogue One.
Oh, there you go. Problem solved.
The thing that's so interesting about her is watching that progression from somebody who has spent most of her life trying not to care to becoming somebody who does care. And I think that was really interesting. And I would agree with you, Brandon, except for the fact that I feel like they explain why she can make that turn to leader is because when she was with Saw Gerrera, she was his best already by the age of 16 when he quote unquote abandoned her. He didn't really. He did it on purpose because people were starting to find out who she was, and he didn't want her being used as a pawn. He was trying to protect her. And so I think she's always had that leadership capability inside of her. She's just been stifling it. And she's been trying not to care about what's going on in the universe. As Saw Gerrera says to her, do you want to see the Imperial flag fly over every planet? And she's like, it's fine with me as long as you don't look up. She is trying to convince herself that she doesn't care, but she realizes that she does. And then all of that potential that she has been, stamping down for all these years can come back roaring to the surface. So it is just a quick story. You're right, because it's just the nature of this type of story. But it's the same thing that happens with Rey. It's the same thing that happens with Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker. I mean, they all have those latent abilities that then once they're able to use them, they just come out. So I think that's a part of the hero's journey in the Star Wars storytelling, that somebody has kind of something there, and then once it's unlocked, it just goes, you know?
Well, just to make clear, so it's not the fact that she became a leader, it's the fact that her attitude went from not caring to caring is what I meant. Like, again, yeah, I got the line that he was her best, or she was his best, leader that he was working with. It was just the fact, because the one line, like, I believed her when she said, I didn't think she was trying to convince herself, as long as you don't look up, it doesn't matter. I believed her opinion on that. So I guess it changed, like, after, spoilers, her dad died, right? So maybe that's what the catalyst was for her to start caring.
Catalyst.
So, but that was what from her not caring to caring is what went too quickly for me.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I do agree that. I mean, I think overall that there are some bumpy parts for the development of the characters through this. I think that probably a lot of that had to do with the rewrites, reshoots, and re-edits that they did. But to speak to Matt's point, I think that the turning point is actually right after she says it doesn't matter so long as you don't look up, or whatever the line is. But then she sees the recording of her father, who she hasn't seen in forever, specifically saying, I love you, I'm sorry, this is how you're going to blow it up, this is what's going to happen. So it actually happens that moment right afterward. She falls on her knees with tears in her eyes, and it's like, so for me, that's sort of like, yeah, it's a bit of a fast forward button, but it works for me. So that's just.
And I felt like that was a moving scene too for Jin's character. I mean, the scene caught me in the feels. I started feeling a little bit as she realizes that her father. She even says to Mon Mothma when she's captured by the rebels, and they're asking her to go on this mission for her because they need her introduction to Saul, and she says, I like to think he's dead, when they ask about her father, because it's easier for her to feel like, oh, he's dead. I don't even have to think about the fact that he might be working for the Imperials. And when she realizes what he has been doing, that he sacrificed himself and everything that he is so that he can make sure that hopefully tyranny can end, she realizes she's been wasting her life, and I thought that was a pretty powerful moment. That whole, and it's the biggest question in this whole movie, and it's mirrored in Jin of, what do you do in the face of such evil? Do you cut and run and just try and eke out an existence, or do you stand and fight? And that's what everybody has to ask in this movie, and Jin is part of that. And I thought, since everybody, well, the rebellion and Jin both have to ask this question, I thought that is what made the arc work for me for her. And I thought Felicity Jones was just really good. I thought she was a phenomenal choice. She has a rawness and a realness to her, and none of her lines I felt delivered as if it was a script. It just kind of felt natural, and it didn't feel forced or refined. It just felt like a gruff girl who's been through hell for, years on her own. So I really liked that she felt really unrefined as a character in that way too. So,
well, I want to ask you guys, do you think she was fighting for the rebellion, or was she fighting for her father?
I think the rebellion. I think she was fighting for the rebellion at the end.
I think that if you're asking what the character's motivation was, I think that does get a little muddy. But I do think that it ties in together where maybe she sees the rebellion as the way to avenge her father. So, I think you could make the argument for that.
No, I agree with you, John. I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah. I think she's looking for revenge on the monolithic thing that took away her father all those years, and her mother. We realize she lost both. But also, I think she believes her own speech to the Alliance Council. So I think it's both. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that's a perfect time to jump into Cassian Andor, because we see a character who, as he admits, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. This is not something that I feel like I had a choice in. I have always chose to do something about, the evil I see around me, and what took everything away from me. And I thought it was interesting that in the end, he has the same motivations that she has. Apparently, he's had everything taken away from him too, his parents, his family, and this is what he has. This is home for him. The rebellion is home, and he's trying to make a new home for the rest of the galaxy. And his struggle, I thought, with Diego Luna played it brilliantly, of doing things that you're not necessarily always proud of, but still feeling like it's the right thing to do to further this cause. Otherwise, it's all lost.
That's the one thing where I would say, because I made reference earlier to how I thought that it started off kind of clunky, and bounced around. That was one of the things where, like, that scene with him at the Ring of Kafrene was, for me, it felt like it was inserted with the express intent of showing that he had done, a horrible thing, so that, we could relate to what he talks about later. But I almost feel like I would have enjoyed his arc more if I hadn't seen that. If I'd had him, I trusted him enough, as an actor. Like, he made me believe in the character enough that I just, like, I wrestle with that scene, because I think that seeing it so expressly sort of blunts his opportunity to explain himself later. And it's just that one scene that jumps out. But, like, I thought that Diego Luna did a great job as Cassian Andor. I really believed him. I bought him completely. I forgot that I was watching an actor. I just accepted him as a character. And I think that, and same praise to Felicity Jones. Both of them I just accepted as being who they were. So I thought that was good.
I would agree with you, John, except for that scene is also the one that starts the whole downward. They get the ball rolling with finding out that it's this planet killer. And that's the whole key to the, Bodhi Rook story with the pilot. That's how they find out about all of that. That's how the rebellion learns about that. So without that scene,
I'm not saying that a scene didn't need to happen maybe to make the story work overall, but I don't know that scene in specific had to be the one to do it. I think that there was another solution out there for them.
Oh yeah, I think it's weird that he kills that guy, right? Like, that's giving him the information, and then when, like, we know that he's a part of the rebellion, and it just seems odd for me that a member of the rebellion would, like, just slaughter this guy in this dark alley. And, like, that was kind of a hard thing to get over for that character.
That was the most shocking thing in this movie for me. I did not expect to see a character like this I'm going into this movie thinking, he's going to be one of the heroes, and he's shooting this guy, who's part of the Alliance.
In the
back. And my next thought was, well, if George Lucas gets hold of this movie, the special edition will have that guy shoot Cassian first.
Zing. Zing.
Oh, John, you have some zingers?
I'm going to be mailing them out to our prize winner for this show, Matt.
I'm going to disagree. I really actually liked the scene, just for the reasons you didn't, John, because I thought it was kind of important to see that, because to me it connected with the fact later on that Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and the council really, it seemed like they thought that there's a way in which they can still go to the Senate and they can fix this mess. That there's a part of them that thinks it's not going to take war. But, Cassian's able to give that speech later. Look, we've been saboteurs. We've seen that on Rebels. We've been assassins. We've been, in the military. We've done all of these things. And if we give up now, it will have all been for nothing. And I thought I liked that we saw that, it's not pretty. It's just not pretty. And that the rebellion is very desperate at this point. Like, that it's not going well for them. I thought that was a good way to show the utter desperation of the rebellion. They may be at their biggest point, it seems like, with membership, but they're continually on the run, and they haven't been able to find any kind of victory so far, really, against the Empire that's made a big difference. So I don't know. To me, it worked. But I do get what you're saying. That is there another way to make that character arc not necessarily have to have been so explicit, so you just have to have the character and the actor sell it to you. Because I get what you're saying, because Diego was selling the rest of the story to you without necessarily having to have that happen.
Right. I keep, the gold standard in my brain that I always go back to is in the second season of Daredevil, the scene where Frank Castle sort of like pours out his heart to Matt Murdock about his past and everything that he's done. That was just an actor delivering lines the way you would see in a theater, where it's like they just said, you know what, we're not going to give you a cheat. You just have to sell us on that. And I think that Diego Luna did it. And then they hedged their bets and said, we want to put this scene in. That's right.
Well, and I think probably, and it's just that rule in film is show, don't tell. And I think that's probably where they went with this. And you're right. If the actor is good enough, they can do it. I think the frustration sometimes, and for most films, is they just tell you things, but the character and the actor aren't doing a good enough job to actually sell it. So it's like that. What do you do? And I completely agree with you. Diego Luna was so good in this movie. I felt like he did sell it. So you're absolutely right. They don't have to have that scene. I actually agree with you on that. I actually just ended up liking the scene, though, because I liked the visual representation of the cost of the rebellion on the characters and just in general. So
I have a question about that scene that I want to ask you. So based on what I saw in that movie, is there a story that explains why that one guy's arm is like broken or whatever in Catalyst? Is that like a part of Catalyst?
I'm sure we'll get a book on it, but it's not in Catalyst.
It's not in Catalyst. I figured that would be. I'm like, as I was watching the movie, I'm like, I bet you that's in Catalyst. Why that guy has a broken arm?
We'll get a Rebels episode so that they
there
can,
you go,
and that's how we'll figure out why the ghost was on Yavin 4.
There actually are some interesting Catalyst references throughout the book. Mainly, they come from Krennic and Urso and Jyn and Lyra. That's really where your big involvement. That and the between Tarkin and Krennic, they're back and forth. The whole book is about that back and forth between those two jockeying for power in the Empire, and that's fantastic in the book. So if you want more on that, go read Catalyst. You're gonna love it. And it really is a fantastic book. And
after you read it, listen to the 602 Club episode.
That's right, where Bruce was on that. So
I want to shoehorn one thing in here before we go too far. So that planet that they were on, that ring system that they were on, was so fantastic looking. Honestly, they could have ripped that right out of Blade Runner. It was so beautiful, that asteroid, and the way that they were joined together by that, like they were like held together. I don't know, it was so cool. Blade Runner totally made me think of Blade Runner.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I thought that was a fantastic set piece and very. It actually reminded me, Bruce, you might, and John, EU kind of place, like you would have seen in the old Legends canon. It sounds like a place that they would have visited in one of those old Legends books.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit, but Ben Mendelsohn is Orson Krennic. He's fantastic as in The Dark Knight. I love, he's so swarmy and schemy and just like, he is... he's so perfect, I think, as this character.
I agree. I love Ben Mendelsohn. I think he's a terrific actor. I enjoy what he brings to characters, and to an extent, I wish I'd gotten more of him. I know that might sound strange because he's so prevalent in the movie, but I wanted even more of him. You'll
love Catalyst.
Yeah, but I mean, Ben Mendelsohn isn't in Catalyst. Ben Mendelsohn is in Rogue One.
Well, now you can just picture him. I mean,
now
you'll know exactly what he sounds like and everything.
But I fell in love with him from the beginning because he was so magnificently conniving, showing up and when Galen says, it's like, oh, ever since she died, and he walks up and like he immediately communicates just with the way he does everything. It's so hard to put your finger on, but he communicates how he knows Galen is lying to him. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like he's just sort of like rolling with it. He's like, okay, I'm going to play along. All right, yeah. I know.
And then when he's like, when she comes onto the scene, he's like, oh, she's back from the dead miraculously.
Yeah, he's I do like him. Krennic was what I hoped he would be, which was a Tarkin-like character, where it was like, I know I'm only going to get him for one movie, or Grievous-like character, where I know I'm only going to get him for one movie, but I enjoyed my time with him. And so, yeah, Krennic, I got a kick out of Krennic. I really liked him. All the way to, when the attack on the base happens, and there's dead silence, it's like things are blowing up, and he just turns around and he just goes, "Are we blind?" And everybody starts scrambling at that moment. It's like, I bought him as who he needed to be. I really enjoyed him.
It's hard to add to that because, you've summed it up so nicely. But yeah, he's very good in the role. He does a very good job acting. His reaction shots as well, like when they come and tell him that somebody's accessed that they've accessed the Stardust file, and he like just turns and stuff. Like his facial reactions are wonderful. The way that he's so slimy when he's like with Vader and he's like, "So I'm still in charge." And, like his tone and everything is beautiful. I think the thing that makes him is that uniform. That white uniform is so awesome.
Well, capes. It's important to accessorize.
That's a direct connection to Star Wars Rebels, because the only other person we've ever seen in a white uniform, well, not the only, because I'll say Yularen in A New Hope is wearing the white uniform, seated at the table there at the Death Star. But the other one that I can think of that's big right now is Thrawn with the Grand Admiral uniform. So I don't know who gets white and why, but I love that he also is so ostentatious with his cape. Like he is so full of himself, he's got the cape. That's right, I'm cool, so I have a cape. And we all know that because Lando has a cape and he's cool. So Krennic is trying to, be as cool as Lando.
He's like Styles on Star Trek 3 with that cane.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a great comparison. Is they're very much similar characters, and yet Krennic is somebody who has, and again, this is a great part about Catalyst, is he's had this vision with the Death Star, and he is so good at controlling people and like pulling people in to get them to do what he wants. He's just as driven as Tarkin, but he is less refined about it. Tarkin is very good at getting what he wants, but it always seems like it's the other person's idea. Krennic is much more showy and flashy, and I think he, nobody does that better than Ben Mendelsohn. I
think
wonderful.
Krennic is a little brat. I think when he was a kid, he was just like this little bratty kid. And it's like, it's my Death Star. Don't take it away from me. I did it. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. And I don't know if this is correct, but I think Ben Mendelsohn actually asked to have a cape. I'm not positive about that, but I think I heard that. But, when I was in Celebration in London, they introduce the cast and they all come out on stage, but then where's Ben Mendelsohn? And of course, this music all of a sudden comes on. And you're like, what's going on? And he has to come out in the full uniform, make this grand entrance with the cape, and he's just whipping that cape around as he turns. And so, he is so into this character. I think he would love to play this character the rest of his life.
Well, one of the characters that I thought was really fascinating, and it's because of there's so much. This is the thing that George would do. He would drop in something that all you wanted to do was know more about that thing, but the movie wasn't going to do that. And I felt like Donnie Yen's character, Chirrut Inru, very much, being this blind warrior monk who is a member of the Guardians of the Wills with this Kyber temple on Jeddah that has a connection with the Jedi somehow. And not only that, but he says, and I've just been reading this biography of George Lucas called George Lucas A Life, and he's been going through the different drafts because I'm at the point where George is creating the first Star Wars film. And the original name of the Force was the Force of Others. And Chirrut says that. May the force of others be with you. May the force of others be with you. And the fact that they mined George's original scripts to pull out ideas for the force and the wills and all of this stuff. I mean, everything about this character, I was like, I just need to know more. And I really loved him. So I wonder what you guys thought.
This is my favorite character in Star Wars. All of Star Wars. I absolutely loved this character. Donnie Yen did such a wonderful job of portraying a blind individual. You know, the way that he like would turn his head like he was listening for something was just outstanding. And like the choreography of the fight sequence was such a joy to watch, you know, and there was humor with his character. You know, when they went to put the mask on his head, he's like, are you kidding me? I'm blind, right? But honestly, I could not get enough of this character, and we'll talk about him later, but his friend as well. Like, those two together were such a joy to watch. But I think that this guy here, Chirrut Imwe, is that how you say it? Chirrut Imwe? I think this is my favorite character in Star Wars.
I'm amazed, Brandon. I hadn't thought of it that way. He's my favorite character in Rogue One, but I hadn't thought, is he my favorite character of all Star Wars? And that's something I'm going to have to think about for a while. But he's definitely my favorite character, and I really want to see a Guardians of the Whills movie, because I want to know more about this. I love the fact that we're finding out more and new sides of the Force and how it can be played and how people relate to it. So there's so much there to explore. But yeah, Donnie Yen did a great job with his character and his abilities when he was fighting. I love this character through and through. I want a movie. I keep saying I want movies on these characters that are dead, but you know, you can always go back to
spoilers. Spoilers.
Yes.
No, I said this about one character last year, and I think with Chirrut, I feel the same way, that this is a character that I feel like could have walked out of, you know, Lucas's brain. This character plays like the way Lucas originally envisioned Obi-Wan when he was trying to get Toshiro Mifune to play him, and he couldn't. You know, because of, you know, different various factors and everything, notably the studio, you know, pushing back about an unknown and wanting more name and stuff like that. But this character, it feels like an homage to that original envisionment of Obi-Wan. And so, you know, just on that level, I enjoy him. I enjoyed him overall because I think that that he was played with a tremendous charm, natural ease that made me like him and want to spend time with him. So that's all I have to add on that.
It's funny that you say that, because the other guy, Baze, is that the guy with the gun?
Yeah, Baze
made
Malbus.
me think of Mifune watching this movie. Totally, as I was watching him, I saw the reincarnation of Mifune watching him.
Interesting. That's really, really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess the kind of character maybe that he played in Seven Samurai. Yeah. No, I mean, I can see your argument for it, sure.
The thing about Chirrut and Baze together, it was that kind of wonderful bromance, you know, the brothers, you know, the friends who are there for each other. And I love that Chirrut is the one who is a firm believer in everything still, and Baze is the friend that you have that kind of falls off the faith wagon, and you're still best friends, and he is completely against everything you believe in, but you're still able to support each other. And I thought their relationship was fantastic, and I really loved those two characters together. And I liked that, again, every character in this movie dies that we, you know, follow in the story, but I loved his kind of arc of coming back to some faith in the end. You know, he watches his friend die, and he dies in the same way, you know, trying to defeat the Empire, but he finds his faith again. And I at least that's the way I read it, is that he finds his faith again.
And he expressed
I liked
at
that.
Celebration by giving that spoiler away.
Yeah. The gif of Alan Tudyk, his reaction when that was given away is pretty fantastic.
Well, let's talk about little K2SO, or not so little K2SO. What did you guys think? Because I do know that in my theater, almost every line that he said the theater laughed.
I thought he was perfect. Like, I thought he was a perfect droid. You know, he was an embodiment and a callback to C-3PO and R2-D2 together, kind of, right? But
he actually
felt...
says the things that I think R2 says, but we don't understand that R2's saying. Probably with less profanity, but, you know.
A little bit, it's beeped out. But it was neat watching him. Like, he was so well done. You know, like the CGI that they did for this character was just outstanding. But the way he was almost like another human actor in it because of some of the motions that he did when he's like, do you want to know the odds of her turning against us? It's high. It's really high. Like when he puts his hands up and stuff, like just the detail that they put into this character was outstanding. And it really, really added to him for sure.
Well, it was Alan Tudyk that actually was on the set. So all those movements and a lot of those lines, some of them were improvised. So they kind of gave him his freedom to do what he wanted to do. Okay. So he really created the character. So hats off to him. If you like this character.
So kind of like Gollum?
Huh?
So kind of like Gollum?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So like he's on.
Yeah, he had the gear on, you know, a new suit that they're using now, but he was definitely on the set. He was actually on stilts too to make himself higher because the character is a tall robot. But yeah, so if you like this character, it's because of Alan.
Nice. See, I don't know any of the behind the scenes stuff, so I really stayed away from all of that.
Yeah, no, K2SO is a lot of fun. You know, he's the comedy character of this one, and I think that I laughed at most of his lines, and I thought he was really fun to watch. He was, you know, and they even gave him an appropriately spoilers, noble death, which I thought was cool.
K2SO's Noble End. That could have been on the soundtrack.
Yeah, right.
So.
Yeah.
No, I think that he's my favorite droid since R2-D2. I feel like you're absolutely right, Brandon, that he feels absolutely real. I never think to myself, oh, he's just a CGI character, because he feels so tactile that he is right there. And I'm sure part of that is that Alan was on the set, and that really helps. But the CGI work is phenomenal on him. And I felt like he's C-3PO, but not annoying. You know, C-3PO gets on my nerves a lot of the times with his lines because it's too fussy. But K2SO just he's could be my favorite droid. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it, but I loved him. And what I loved about him is that he felt different and new, like he was an extension of other characters and other droids we've seen, but he didn't just kind of feel like a copy at all. He was his own thing, and I really liked them allowing, you know, Alan to create this character. When he grabs that grenade out of the air, he's like, "You two are making a lot of noise for some people who want to fit in," and he just throws it behind him and blows up all the stormtroopers. I mean, that stuff was gold. It was great.
The timing was really well done on his jokes.
Yes, I really enjoyed that. So I thought he was wonderful. Want to ask you too. So the last of this, you know, dirty dozen, but they're not really a dozen. So Bodhi Rook is the former Imperial pilot who defects and joins this group. What did you end up thinking about him and the storyline we get with Riz Ahmed playing the character and all?
Stole the show for me. I'm glad.
Really?
I'm glad we're talking about him. Of all of the characters that I watched, you guys are going on about K2SO, and I love Chirrut, but if I were to pick a favorite character from this film, it is him. I loved him from beginning to finish. I thought he was played perfectly. I thought that he was completely and utterly convincing. This doesn't take away from Diego Luna or anybody else's work. I just thought that this guy, my sincere hope is I enjoyed his performance so much. I hope that this is a huge breakout role for him. I want to see him in tons more stuff. I thought he was fantastic.
He was an interesting character because we don't get a character like him in a lot of movies that's like, it's not like he's uncertain with himself, but he he kind of stutters and he's like nervous and he did a very good job of the role for sure. But it was kind of nice to see a character like that where, you know, when they took off his mask and Saw was there and he's like, that's for you. And, you know, they're like, oh, they didn't capture me. I surrendered. They didn't capture me. I surrendered. And it was neat. It was a good performance. I agree with you.
I'm glad we're going through each one of these characters, because I said earlier that I didn't feel like I really connected with a lot of the characters, but as we're talking through, I'm finding myself that maybe I connected with them more than I thought, because I do love this character. I thought it was a great performance. I thought they all did great performances, and there's not a single character in here that I don't like. So now I want to go see it again right now, because I'm like, really, as we're talking through this, I'm really loving these characters more and more. And, Bodhi Rook is definitely one of them.
It's interesting, John, that you said that he's your favorite. I hadn't heard anybody say that, but I agree with everyone here. I think he's fantastic. I think he plays the role very convincingly. I think he has the hardest job because he doesn't have as much to do as everybody else, and he has to sell his storyline a lot quicker than everybody else. But I buy it. I think he's great, and I agree with you, John. I think he's a good actor that I would like to see him in more things, and in this role he nails it. And I feel what you're saying, Brandon, specifically the nervousness that he brings to the role, that he's not a character that's overly sure about himself or was ever thought of himself as a hero, but he is the one who is just overcoming and doing what he feels is right and what he knows is right. And I liked that. I thought it was really good. So I'm right there with you. I don't, as we talk through the characters, there's not any one of them that I'm like, I don't know. It was no. And coming to Mads Mikkelsen, this is the character Galen that I wish we had gotten more of, if there was a way to, because he's so good. He's phenomenal. I think he nails the role as her father, Jen's father, and the reluctant hero of putting his life on the line to try and make sure that the Empire doesn't reign forever. I really like Mads Mikkelsen in this movie.
I wonder how Jen would have felt as her father grew older if she would have looked in his refrigerator and seen people body parts in there. I have a really tough time separating Mads Mikkelsen from Hannibal now. Like, when I first started watching Hannibal, I'm like, oh, hey, it's the guy from Casino Royale. And now that whenever I see Mads Mikkelsen, I'm like, hey,
no,
it's
I got
Hannibal.
your reference there, but I was looking at Matt's reaction like, what?
Yeah. As another fanable, I will say that Mikkelsen did an admirable job of providing appropriate distance from that character in his performance. So
thank God.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I'm so used to seeing Mads Mikkelsen play just like a straight up bad dude, whether it's Casino Royale or Hannibal or whatever. Yeah, it was kind of refreshing to see him, have a take on somebody who, has normal human emotions. And, he did a fine job.
Yeah, I like the fact that he's a scientist, but he's not some whimpering scientist, some scrawny guy, that he's got a build to him. He has a command of himself. So he comes across to me as that he would be maybe some authoritative genius if he was in the right setting and was just let to go loose. I mean, he could actually be a leader, is the sense I get from him, a leader of people and a leader of a science community. Just him, the actor himself, given that portrayal, gave me that kind of feeling of the character.
What you said there, John, is exactly what my wife said. She's like, you see him as a bad guy all the time. It's refreshing to see him portray a good guy.
Well, a good guy who makes some, he still did help build the thing. Let's remember that.
Well, and I felt like the scene that totally sold me was the scene that we'd seen in the trailer where he's hugging his daughter and he's like, whatever I do it to protect you. And then coupled that with the hologram, those two things just really got me with the character. And again, it was a moment where, seeing his performance, I could then replay what happened in the book Catalyst and I was even more enjoying the progression of the character, because this is just where, again, I think the book did a fantastic job of supporting the film and helping me know his arc so that it came full circle. Whereas I wanted more of him, but I also knew why. This movie, you can't have more of everyone. There's no way. So I feel like it's economical storytelling. They did a great job with giving you just enough. I think the movie could have a more exposition than it needs, but I think it handles it well enough to where I'm actually glad that it has the exposition that it does. Because again, it kind of go back to another conversation we had earlier about The Force Awakens. If there's anything I knock that movie for, it's not having enough exposition. I feel like they corrected themselves well in this film. So I'm glad they did. Which just brings us back to one last main character that we get, and that's Forrest Whitaker playing Saw Gerrera, the veteran of the Clone Wars. And what did you guys end up thinking about him and his performance and kind of his Vader-esque appearance and get up and just general almost craziness?
See, I don't know this character because I don't watch the Clone Wars and I haven't watched Rebels. So like this is my first exposure to this character, right? So I don't know how he compares or contrasts to any previous performance of the character. But I'm glad that you mentioned it because I was going to mention it too. It's like this guy is like a Vader. He's more machine than man, and he's breathing, and they even use the same hissing effect, right? But watching him, I wonder how he got to this point, and I'm only exposed to what I see in the movie, and I'm wondering, I totally thought that he was at some point exposed to that boogly thing.
I like the fact that you said, I'm wondering how he got to this point. We do see a little bit of him in the Clone Wars, but he's not like some major character that we've seen in many episodes. But I like the fact that we don't know how did he get to this point and why is he breathing in this mask and what had happened to him. Because that's the beauty of, I think, Star Wars is you create question marks and you wonder and you create the history in the back of your mind of how these characters ended up as they are. And I like the mystery behind the character. I'm sure we're going to find the answer someday, but sometimes I wish they weren't answered.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's sort of the thing I've always wrestled with the tie-in books and everything is it's like some of the stuff I just don't need to know. But with this character, the difficulty I will always have is how much of him from the previews didn't make it to the final cut, including a line that I adored. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, it's not in there. Okay. Like it's one of those things where I just will always be fascinated by how much they had, but reshot or didn't show. And that, I'm not saying that takes away or gives anything to his character in the film. It's just that I'll always wonder that. But in terms of playing, like a quirky, interesting character, I thought that Whitaker made some great choices with his voice and with his mannerisms. I felt like the character got a little bit of short shrift in terms of screen time. I would have liked to see him breathe a little bit more or maybe had a little bit more dialogue, because the scene that he was actually in with Jyn before the hologram plays like it's a great scene. And I would have liked to just see a little bit more of him.
You just want to see him breathe more?
Yes, just do nothing. I want 4 minutes of him just breathing.
What I love about the fact that it is Saw Gerrera in the movie is this idea. Star Wars, George always said that Star Wars for him was like a real historical event that they just took place in the galaxy and they filmed it. And it's something that Gareth definitely wanted to bring to the film. And when they were writing the story and they had this character, the story group said, well, why don't we use Saw Gerrera? And one of the reasons is that Saw Gerrera was a big part of the Star Wars Underground storyline that George was creating for the live action series. And still sitting on the shelf, and I don't know if we'll ever get to see it, but they pulled this character out and used him for Clone Wars as a kind of setup for that, and then, you know, they've never done anything else with that live action series, so they put him in here, and I felt like the character made so much sense then. He was already kind of a little bit more extreme in the Clone Wars episodes he was in, and to see that he's become kind of a problem for the rebellion because he's so much of an extremist that he's not, you could get the sense that he's not necessarily worried about civilian casualties or anything like that. He's so focused on fighting the Empire, and for over 20 years of war for himself, his body is broken down too, and you know, he's fought for the cause, and it's taken everything out of him. I thought it was brilliant, and it all works together. And exactly what you said, Brandon, where you're like, I don't know his history, but he's interesting. I pray that by connecting the dots, people will want to go back to the Clone Wars and see it, and then want to experience the rest of it, because that series is phenomenal. And I love the fact that they didn't just create a new character. They already had a character, and they said, well, let's just use him. You know, they don't tell you all of his backstory in this movie or anything like that, but they made a point to show, I think, that the Clone Wars are important. They happened. They're part of that history that George filmed, and therefore it matters. And I love the fact that Saw Gerrera was in the movie, and I thought Forrest Whitaker did a great job of playing a man who is on the edge of sanity because of everything he's been through. I loved it. And I think it makes for an interesting thing because, you know, Mon Mothma, Bail, and the Rebellion, they're still hoping that they can work through the Senate. This is where I thought was interesting. We got some politics back in Star Wars, and they're still hoping that they can go to the Senate and say, hey, they're creating this Death Star that they don't know about. We need to stop this. And, you know, Saul's on the other side being like, no, it's all lies. The Empire's everywhere. And I thought that juxtaposition between that was pretty fantastic.
Seeing Bail Organa for me in this was the oh yeah moment for me. And it was like, yeah, they are really, really pulling everything together. So, yeah, I really liked seeing him in it. So I gotta say that first and foremost. I liked that they continued on with a little bit of the politics that happened in the prequel trilogy. But it was interesting to see it as from one to the other. They're kind of going from the politics to the rebellion.
This really does a great connection between the prequels, the Clone Wars, Rebels, and the original trilogy, pulling it all together. It really does. And so having Bail Organa there, and even referencing his Jedi friend, I really...
Who could that
what's
be?
That?
Who could that be?
I'm still trying to figure that one out. Maybe they'll make a movie. But I really wish we could have had more Bail Organa. We've always gotten sprinkles of him in these movies, and I'd like to see him take more of a lead role in something. There I go again. I want another movie. See, all these characters can just spin off into their own movies. I'd be very happy about that.
Well, what's interesting about that is that I think that one of the things that this movie does function like is as a serial itself, in that it ends in such a way that it is, you know, okay, let's pop in the original.
Oh, come
Star
back
Wars
next
now.
week because the rebellion, will they survive?
It basically.
Did you do that, John?
That's-
Did you pop in A New Hope after you saw the movie?
No, I didn't. But it's obviously constructed as such. Dude, I got home too late at night. I was like, I went to bed.
I did too, but I still had to do it.
No, it is interesting to me because, and Bruce, you saying, you know, I want a movie about this character, a movie about that character. Like, I almost wish they would embrace this idea of having, you know, like a Netflix series or a Disney series, whatever, you know, whatever platform you want to put it on, that would just be these characters, like a little hour and a half, 2-hour movie just about these characters, but it's just on the streaming platform, and do it serialized. And I think that would be really, really interesting instead of releasing it in theaters and having it be, an anthology series just about these different characters through time. That would be pretty interesting.
Well, I do feel like with Mon Mothma, Bail, and just the rebellion in general, I am crossing my fingers that that's what this stinking Star Wars Rebels show is going to start doing, because now that they have all of the pieces on the board, they can go play with them and build up to that, and that's exactly what when you call a show Star Wars Rebels.
Well, I mean, Saw Gerrera's in the new promos for Star Wars Rebels. So
that's right. So, I mean, they're already starting to do that, so I think that's fantastic. What I loved about these characters in here was the way in which we saw them realize that there is no hope in the political system anymore because everything's gamed. Palpatine's got everything under control, and the only answer is civil war. And I thought that was really nice to see them have to finally kind of give up that the last breath of the old Republic dies, because the very next movie, obviously, the Senate is disbanded. And why? Because, Krennic said it, because the Senate becomes obsolete with the Death Star. Because if we don't like you, we'll just blow up your freaking planet. And I thought it was really nice that Mon Mothma and Bail Organa realized that quickly enough in this movie that that's not an option anymore. The only option is war. And I like that the movie forces their hand because, our rogue characters have some rogue hope, and they go and they go rogue. And they force the hand of the rebellion, but thankfully they do, because it gives the rebellion their first victory against the evil empire, and leads into what we know as A New Hope. And I think that's beautiful. They structured this movie, I think, fantastically to do that. And some surprises. We already knew that Vader was going to be in the movie a little bit. So Vader and Tarkin and Leia, oh my. I mean, we'll start with Vader. And can I just say how cool it is that we finally got Vader's castle? Like, I was that's the moment I wanted to stand up and cheer in the theater. I was like, Vader's castle!
I agree that Vader's castle is great. The one thing that made that scene jump out at me both times I've seen it is the fact that the convention of popping up the planet name when they go there was broken with Mustafar, and that's going to permanently live under my skin. Like, they did Edu, and they did Ring of Kafrene, and they did Jeddah, and they did all of these things. But when they went to Mustafar, they didn't put the name up. And I was like, guys, come on.
Why didn't they do that? I don't understand that.
Yeah, like that
Did they just expect everybody to know it was Mustafar?
I guess, but I mean, like, seriously, it's like going to occupy a whole section of my brain for quite some time, because I'm like, why wouldn't you? But the it'll
be fixed on the Blu-ray.
Yeah, well,
I hope so.
We'll
actually,
Rogue One, a special edition.
Yeah, extended edition. But
there you
go. I thought the scene, seeing him in at Mustafar was great. I love the fact that they brought that back, because I mean, with Return of the Jedi, they'd gone so far as to build the miniature, of the castle on the lava, and it's like, okay, cool. Well, in some way, it came back. That's cool.
Well, I just thought the brilliance of having it that he chose that the only place apparently he feels comfortable is back on the planet where his life ended, and a new life began for him. And that as he's in the Bacta tank refreshing himself, because I can't imagine being in that suit's good for you for that long, and his acolytes around him, that help take care of his castle. The fact that his castle actually looks a little bit like the Kyber temple on Jeddah. They have very similar structural looks to them. The whole thing, the fact that he even seems to be on the same lava flow where he got cut down, and he looks out the window, he's he probably literally is looking at where Obi-Wan cut him down. I mean, just the whole thing, the brilliance of it, the way that it must fuel his anger and his rage in the dark side to be there. I loved it. And the way that he deals with Krennic, too, choking him, and let's not choke on our aspirations, shall we? It just was pure joy of seeing Vader as the utter badass that, we always expected him to be when we saw him in A New Hope. I loved it. His every appearance that he had was perfect, down to him just mowing down people on the way to TV.
That's the part in the theater that I was talking about where I started laughing out loud because I was like, "Oh, cool, yeah, great." This is, and hats off to the guy playing the guy banging on the door, like, "Go open the door, please, God." So that was a great bit. The whole Vader thing also makes me think of another shot in the trailers where he's standing in front of a screen with red display and everything, and I'm like, well, what happened there? I can't escape that. Like, was there just an alternate path for Vader and they changed it so that we got him, boarding the Murder Express and killing everybody? Or is it that was cut? Like, that's always going to be sitting there in my brain. But I was very happy with the wanton slaughter of all of these poor souls because I'm a disturbed individual and it was fun to watch.
Well, and it just seems so Vader. I mean, like, he doesn't care. And he's on a mission. Like, he's on from his point of view, he's on a very important mission.
Well, what's interesting is, to me, seeing Vader use his saber to cut people down like that is much more in the vein of like the expression of Vader that came up in Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Because, like, with Empire and Forward, we see him choke somebody in Star Wars and, he kills Ben and everything. But, like, his shtick became, I'm going to choke everybody that I dislike. Choke, choke, choke. Everybody gets a choke. Whereas in Splinter of the Mind's Eye, he, like, cuts the Imperial officer in half when he's displeased with him. And it's a much more hands-on Vader than I think we're used to seeing on screen. So I thought that was really fun to see, as a callback in and of itself of, like, the original envisionment of Vader and how he would operate.
Well, this Vader reminds me of Episode 3, where he goes and just cuts and mows down all the Separatist leaders. I mean, this is exactly that Vader. It reminds me of the Vader that we see in Lords of the Sith, the book, where he just is wantonly mowing down whoever he needs to. He goes from one side of a Star Destroyer to the other that's being taken over by rebels and just annihilates everybody. And it's one of the coolest scenes I've ever... I mean, so this is the Vader, I think, that we pictured in our minds of what he was like when he just was let off the chain, like Vader off the chain. and you did not want Vader off the chain. People in the galaxy didn't really know who Vader was unless you came face to face with him and then you were dead. So I think Gareth Edwards just, to me, he gets it so completely of what Star Wars is and who these characters are. And I loved the fact that this Vader feels like a combination of everything we had in our minds plus everything we saw at the very end of the prequels. It's wonderful. And even what we saw in Rebels, John, when he goes after Ezra and Kanan, I mean, he is just vicious. It's wonderful.
You said something there, John, that made me think of something. So you're like Vader, his shtick became to choke people. Choke, choke, choke. I wonder if on Darth Vader's Facebook page, instead of poke, he's got the choke option. He's just like, Vader's choked you.
Yeah. Everybody's terrified to go on social media.
Around Mustafar, he wears a shirt that says, I give throat hugs.
Yeah,
so.
right.
That's why he's not on Twitter. He can't choke.
Yeah, right.
That's his Twitter handle, throat hugs.
That scene that you're talking about, though, John, at the end when it was dark and you're like, you knew exactly they're going to light this up with the sword, with the lightsaber.
Yeah.
They're going to light it up with yes, they lit it up, yes. And when he like throws that guy to the roof.
Yep.
And oh man, it was like I had a complete and total nerdgasm when that happened. I'm like, yes, this is
I think
epic.
the whole theater did, you know, I mean, because like people were kind of cheering when it started happening, which is weird because they're all cheering because people are dying. But it's, you know, it's Vader. You know, you just do
well, it's
that.
great because he's not the main villain of the movie yet. He gets to put the final stamp at the end of it, which was perfect. And we have to, you know, give kudos James Earl Jones. Man, he's back 40 years later, still doing Vader.
And he sounded perfect. I mean, well, let me say this. He sounds like Vader from Episode 6. He sounds more like the Return of the Jedi Vader, but that's fine. He still sounds enough like himself.
I always sort of chalk it up where I'm like, well, the acoustics are different. That's why he sounds a little bit different. That's fine. You know, there's you know, it's interesting though because the Vader thing for me comes back to, you know, because we said, you know, Tarkin and Vader and Leia, oh my, because of course that leads right into Leia, and I embraced the Tarkin thing from the beginning. As soon as I saw it, I said, you know what, these guys, they're going for broke, and I applaud that. I favor boldness in movie making choices 100% of the time. Totally cool with it, loved it. But for some reason, I thought that Leia was going too far. I thought they should have kept her cloak and not shown the face. I don't know why, but it was one of those things where Tarkin was a fully realized character through it, and I totally just said, okay, I'm going to go along with this, and I'm just going to play along, and I'm good, and I'm not going to look at like anything that's going to be like, oh, well, that's, you know, see, I know the guy's dead, and I know the trickery that they've used, and if I notice anything that's, you know, amiss, all I did in my head was say, I loved what they did in Tron Legacy because they went for broke, and look at how far they've come. In a sense, it's almost scary what they can do now with CG effects. Like, imagine what they're going to be able to do in another 10 years. It's going to be insane. Like, down to the fact, like, I was paying attention with Tarkin to what they did with his teeth. His teeth, so many times the downfall of a digital character is the mouth movement, which they got really good, and I think that they were lucky because Peter Cushing had a very, I don't know how any other way to say it, but like sort of like a traditional sort of stodgy British mouth movement, like that. He delivered his lips were very stiff, but his teeth, if you pay attention to his teeth in this, they're imperfect as a regular humans are, and so many times they screw up teeth on digital characters where they're always exactly the same shape, smoothness, and whiteness, and instead there looked like little stains on some of his bottom teeth and stuff, and I was like, and they were a little bit uneven. I was like, that was attention to detail that I respected. But then when it got to Leia and you actually saw her face, for some reason it pulled me completely out of the movie, and I think it's because with Cushing, like they used lighting. I think the lighting they chose was like too bright for Leia for me to completely buy it. Whereas they had the wisdom, I think, to keep Tarkin. They did a lot of cuts, and they kept the lighting in all of the scenes he was in dark enough that if there were any sort of like visual incongruities, I didn't pay as much attention to them. Whereas I thought Leia was too bright and too much center frame for me to really go in for it. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense to me because I feel somewhat the same way. Leia didn't work for me as well. I was not surprised that we would see Leia. I thought, again, like you were saying, I thought she'd be cloaked. We would maybe see her at a distance if we saw anything of her. But I was actually pleased to see that they had the guts to go ahead and just show her face, but it didn't work for me quite as well. And I don't know if it's like you're saying, she's center framed. It was a close up. Maybe if the camera was pulled back and she was a little more at distance, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Tarkin really worked for me. And I could tell some of it was CGI. Of course, I know Peter Cushing is dead. And so it wasn't 100% perfect, but it was close to it. But the thing that sold me was after the movie, I heard a guy walk up to a friend of his. They weren't sitting together, and they start talking. And the one guy says, now, that's the same actor who was in the first movie, right? So he's in this one. And the guy said, that's not him. He's dead. He goes, "What? He was just in the movie." He goes, "That's CGI." He goes, "That was CGI." That guy had no idea. And today I had lunch with Shaz Bazaar of the Techno Retro Dads podcast, and he heard a similar comment from somebody else. So people who don't know Peter Cushing's dead actually think that's a real actor.
I liked Leia. I loved Leia. The smile on my daughter's face this morning when she saw Princess Leia at the end of the movie was just amazing. She was so thrilled to see Princess Leia. Princess Leia worked for me. I'm glad that they didn't leave it, because you're used to them showing just the back of a character or something like that. And again, they went for broke in it. What confused me with this movie is with how much they did with Tarkin and the fact that they went all out with Leia. I was confused. Why didn't they do that with Mon Mothma? And I don't know the character's name, but the white suited, white bearded man of the rebellion as well, because his
General
character was
Dodonna.
in A New Hope as well.
Well,
sorry,
General Dodonna.
Why didn't they CG those characters as well?
For me, I sort of looked at Dodonna, and I won't lie, mentally, I'm like, that's not really Dodonna. Like, that's a Dodonna's assistant or something like that. Like, I get what you're saying. We're like that incongruity of having different actors, but at the same time, I thought that Mon Mothma looks close enough that, and there are years between A New Hope and Return of the Jedi. I'm more okay with it, as opposed to the fact that we're going to get to Donna immediately after this in A New Hope. So that's why, sort of mentally, I'm like, that's not really Dodonna.
I'm pretty sure that it just comes down to money and time, because I can't imagine that it is a quick process to do what they did with Tarkin. I'm pretty sure that ILM was working night and day for, 6 months or more to make Tarkin look like he does. I'm pretty sure that they didn't spend as much time on Leia because she's on screen for, 20 seconds? So, and I think that's the other thing. Tarkin's on screen enough so that you get used to him. Mm-hmm. You become accustomed to him, and in the back of your mind, you can throw away the fact that, yes, he's dead, and make it, and again, it's just make-believe that he's alive still. And the same thing doesn't happen with Leia, because you're just not there with her enough to make it feel completely real. It does what it needs to do. Mon Mothma, that's the same character actor that they used in episode 3, but they cut her scene out. And so I think she is downright perfect in the role. I think she
was great.
Yeah.
I didn't have a problem with her as a character. I'm just like, if they're going that deep with Tarkin and that deep with Leia, why would they not have done all those
it's
other
just
two? She
time
did a
and
great
money,
job
I'm
as
sure.
Mon Mothma.
Yeah, the amount of screen time that Mon Mothma has is the same amount of time that Tarkin has, and I think it would just cost a fortune. Dodonna is the same way. He's not in the movie enough to make that cost where you'd want to spend your resources.
While we're talking about these three characters, there's one thing that kind of bothered me. I don't know if it bothered you guys or not. Vader's neck was too thick in this movie. When you see him in A New Hope,
the outfit in this more closely resembles what you see in A New Hope than the previous incarnation in Revenge of the Sith, with the way they draped the cape and everything. And any inconsistency, I will mentally chalk up to he dressed in a hurry because director Krennic had shown up.
Mm. Yeah, Vader's got different outfits.
He pulled off the wrong helmet. Yeah. He just pulled off,
but if this is taking place minutes before A New Hope, like even at the end,
Brandon, I've heard other people say that, and actually, my kids said that too. So I've heard that quite often.
Yeah, but his cheeks are also symmetrical, which they weren't in the original, movie.
No, they're not. I just rewatched A New Hope, and I was like, man, that.
Yeah, no, they made a big deal in episode 3 when they laser sculpted his helmet in that one. The guy doing the props actually said this is the first time we're going to have a perfectly symmetrical Vader mask in the history of Star Wars. So,
before it was by hand. So,
right. You can tell.
Especially
one of
in
his
A New Hope,
quote-unquote cheeks in A New Hope, you can see almost like finger indents on it.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, that's true. And Vader could have various masks. You know, it's like in Star Trek Beyond where Kirk opens his closet and there's the same uniform. Well, Vader's got several of the same masks. They're just slightly different.
Oh, yeah. So in this one, he's like, gotta put on my murdering mask. And then like a New Hope, he's like, no, I'm going to put on my questioning mask.
It's like those T-shirts where they have the emotion for the character, but it's always just the same picture.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Vader is that one. It's pretty much just the same mask with like a teensy variation.
Right,
you know,
right.
Oh, murdering mask. Oh God. Okay, so this film, and we've talked about it, and their whole articles just with chock full of things that. Where this movie is just kind of weaving that tapestry where you see tons of Easter eggs. And in this movie, this is the part where I just wanted to cheer. I saw Chopper. I saw the Ghost. They called for General Syndulla over the comms. Of course, Bail Organa saw the Wills, Vader's castle. I mean, this movie was just embracing everything that was Star Wars, and weaving that all together was just phenomenal. I mean, they even answered why Luke is called Rogue 5. Rogue 5 dies, so they just replaced Rogue 5 with Luke. And that kind of stuff, like, it's just tiny little details like that. But again, giving Rebels love and giving the Clone Wars love and then just sprinkling in all these other little things, that's what the connective tissue and weaving the tapestry of Star Wars is. We're continuing to this is exactly how you do it. This is exactly how you do it.
And don't forget the most important one, the blue milk.
Yeah, blue milk.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a lot for and again, I will still wrestle. I think that there is that connective tissue. I think that there's a lot of things to make hardcore fans happy, and I will continually ask people who see the movie who I know aren't as into it as the four of us are. I will continually ask them because I know of somebody. I was talking about it with Schindler over on Great Shot Kid, and he mentioned how there was a non-fan who watched Rogue One, somebody who was too young to like have gotten into Star Wars by this point and everything, and walked out of it and their basic reaction was, I don't know. I didn't really care. Like I will always, you know, all of the stuff that they did to draw us in, I don't know if it skews opinion or not, because we know
but
what
who
they're
cares,
doing to make
John?
us happy.
I'm gonna. Who frickin' cares if it skews opinion? It's a frickin' Star Wars movie. It's made for Star Wars fans. Yes, they want other people to like it too, but they're also doing it for the fans. So everything that you're saying, like, I'm upset right now because I just don't understand who frickin' cares if everybody gets everything. Like, they're doing it for you. They're doing it for me, and I don't care if other people get it. I do, and I love it.
Right, but I'm just saying in terms of being somebody who isn't looking at it from two different perspectives. Looking at it from the perspective of somebody who's a diehard Star Wars fan, but then also looking at somebody who's just like, you know, just a fan of cinema. Like, for me to, you know, I really want something to be able to operate on, you know, both levels and be accessible to as many people as possible. And, you know, get back to that question of like, sure, it's entertainment, but is it art? Does it need to be art? Does it need to be these things or that things? Like it's almost like, you know, and I'm not saying that the movies are going to be the same value or goodness or enjoyability or anything like that. But for instance, at this point when they come out, and the trailer was in front of Rogue One, when they come out with the trailer for Fate of the Furious, I'm a huge Fast and Furious series fan. And I'm sitting there, I'm clapping like a trained seal, giggling while I'm watching Fate of the Furious Theater. I'm like, yay, and I'm going to use the hashtag. But then there's going to be somebody sitting next to me that's like, what the hell is going on? And it's like...
Sub?
Yeah.
Is that a submarine?
Yeah. And so...
I'm like that because I could care less about those movies.
Right, but that's the
just because
but
I've
that's the
chosen not
thing.
to watch them.
But that's the thing. I can fully embrace the fact that when I go to see Fate of the Furious, it is a love letter just to me. They're just saying, you know what? You like it. Come back here and come and see it again. And I will say, yes, sir, I'm coming to see that movie right now. but I really want the movie. Like, I would love to go to Fate of the Furious and then come out of it and say, oh my gosh, if you haven't seen any of the previous 7, you can go see this one and have a great time. And, I think that in a certain sense, I look for that in any movie that I watch, regardless of what franchise it is.
And since I yelled at you, I'll answer first. I do think that people who don't know Star Wars as well as we do can still enjoy this movie, because I think Brandon made actually a fantastic point earlier, was that this movie is a full story for the characters that are in it. And so you actually get to follow the full character arc of Jin and everybody else that we meet in this movie that are our quote-unquote main characters. And I think they did that intentionally because they want people who haven't seen everything in Star Wars to still feel like they can see the movie and get something out of it. And then, of course, they also do really care about, and this is where I felt like they weren't afraid to make a Star Wars movie for Star Wars fans. And think of them first and not the general audience. And I'm okay with that, because honestly, at this point, that's what I wanted with, and this is what I was frustrated by with Force Awakens, is it felt like it was divorced from the rest of the Star Wars franchise in a lot of ways, because it was just telling me a story I'd already really seen, and not in a new and exciting way, and it felt divorced from the history of Star Wars. But this is a movie that celebrates the history of all of Star Wars, before and after, and I thought that was really cool. And in fact, I even saw parts of this movie where I was like, oh, I could see where they could pick up some piece of that and use it in the sequel trilogy. It was every part of Star Wars, and that to me is why I like this movie so much more than I like The Force Awakens. It spoke to me on every level, but I do think that you could get something out of it and enjoy it even if you hadn't seen everything that we've seen. And I mean, John, you and I and Bruce specifically, we've seen everything there is to see in Star Wars. So, and Brandon hasn't, and he still really enjoyed it and liked it much more than The Force Awakens. So I think we kind of answered the question about, we even have our guinea pig right here.
Yeah, that's fine. Brandon, did you like the prequels?
I really do like the prequels a lot. I'm not a huge fan of the Phantom Menace. I will say that right out. But I really like a lot of the stuff that happens in 2 and 3 that I think are really cool. I love watching Yoda lightsaber battle with Palpatine. I think that is absolutely fantastic. I love Kamino. I think that those aliens on Kamino with the long arms are so cool. So there is a lot of stuff that I really do like. I'm not a big fan of Hayden Christensen as Anakin, but honestly, I think that they're both episode 2 and 3, I think, are better than The Force Awakens, I think.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I'm actually not interested in like the Force Awakens comparison. And I know we're like, it's impossible to avoid and everything like that. But I just, just in terms of I get the positive wave, and I did like and enjoy this film. But I think that there were definitely things that could have been done better that weren't as technically successful as they should have been, as I would have hoped they would have been, just in terms of just a general movie structure sort of thing. And I think that it's very easy to forgive those sins because, at the end I'm giggling because Vader's killing everybody, or the shot of the Star Destroyers being shoved together is just brilliantly animated and beautiful to look at, and those sorts of things. So it's, I think that there is very much a, an effect that could, sort of work in its favor now, but against it later sort of thing. And it, that's just part of my own reaction to it. Just seeing some of the shortcomings that are there.
I honestly think this movie will continue to grow in people's opinion, especially because people that might be in the position you're talking about that haven't seen as much of Star Wars will then go see the rest of Star Wars, and they're going to think back on this and be like, oh, that's what, like they're going to put all the pieces of the puzzle together that we already have, and I think they'll continually look back and enjoy the way in which this lovingly reflects that history that we already know. I don't know. What do you think, Bruce?
I think this works better than the Aftermath novels.
Yeah, you're setting the bar awful high there, Bruce.
And I say that, and I'm kind of joking, but I mean, I am joking. But I bring that up also because actually I did think of Aftermath when I watched this movie at one point, because I thought this movie shows that you can make a Star Wars movie without having your main characters that you know from the previous movies, that you can set up a separate story within this universe and still make it relevant and have enough connection there and enough tissue with all the movies and all the mythology to make this worthwhile. It means something, and I didn't get that from the Aftermath novels. So my point is that this works. You don't have to have Luke, Han, and Leia. You don't have to have Skywalkers. You can have any characters in a Star Wars movie and make it work.
I agree 100%. I mean, I love the anthology format of this, and I really hope that they do more. I don't want to see Rogue 2, right? I want to see something else. I can't wait for the Han Solo one, but I want to see something else. I don't want to just focus on the characters that we know. And I was a big champion. I know that it's not going to be there, but I was a big champion for the new Star Trek series to be an anthology type show. I mean, like, I love True Detective. True Detective, the anthology format of that show is fantastic. And I want to see this now. I want to see this more. I just started watching Black Mirror as well. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that's another anthology show where each episode is independently from every other episode that's come before it. And it's it opens up such a fascinating treasure of storytelling opportunities, and it's rich and diverse, and I don't know, I think that's one of the things that makes it so appealing, and I think it's one of the things that'll make it so accessible to the average audience member.
Well, the biggest theme I really enjoyed in the movie was just the power of hope and a sacrifice, and I thought, obviously it's really tied up in the speech that Jin gives, about, you give up, or, you give up, you go home, or you fight. And, you can tell that the rebellion is really on that knife's edge after, 19 years of slowly trying to put all this together. And I thought it was a great story about, perseverance and the courage to act even when you don't know how the outcome's going to come. That the importance of having faith and hope and love. Faith leads to the faith that something can change leads to the hope that it really can, and the love to make that play out. The love for something other than yourself. And I think that is really the journey that Jin goes on in here, where she makes that change, and so does, the rebellion of getting the courage to actually do something. And I don't know, to me, after the year that we've had here in 2016, it really struck home for me the importance of hope, and that, if you really believe in something, it's probably going to take sacrifice to make it happen. And sometimes that sacrifice costs your life, But if you really, truly believe in something, freedom isn't free, And I loved that whole idea in this film.
The sacrifice part of the storyline really affected me a lot watching this, because I think it not only provided a valuable message for the film, in that, they're sacrificing themselves for the greater good, right? And I don't know that it generally portrays war in a positive light. Like a lot of war movies will take the stance that it's either portraying war positively or it's portraying war negatively. And I think it leaves it ambiguous in this film, right? These people are portrayed as heroes, which is positive, but it also shows the negative ramifications of what's happening to them because of the war. But it also enhanced the storytelling because the fact that every single main character in this movie dies amps up the climax of the film. Like, we know that they're going to get the plans, right? But because all of these people are dying along the way and it makes it harder and harder, it's amping up the tension. All of this sacrifice is amping up the tension of, are they going to get the plans? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I came into this film hearing people say, well, since this is a standalone film, they're probably going to kill off all the characters. And I was like, I don't think, I'm sure they're going to kill off some of them, but they'll probably write it where our hero rides off into the distance, never to be seen again for some reason or whatever. And I thought it was a very bold choice that they actually decided in a Star Wars movie, which tends to try to be family friendly as it can, that they're going to kill off all of our heroes and all these main characters, but not in a gruesome way, but in this heroic way, each individually. And it really hones in on the idea of sacrificing yourself for the greater good. And it also shows to me how much the Rebels and the Alliance really put themselves on the line, which I never really got as much from the other movies because they were faceless characters that usually died. So in this context, it really changes the way I look at A New Hope, that, man, people that are real people are dying for their beliefs. And hope is such a great message in this because it leads right into A New Hope. And it's the last line of the movie. And it's also a name of this, one of the suites of scores in the soundtrack.
It was interesting because, this is a period where we really have, broken faith and a galaxy that is feeling hopeless. And what I really liked in this film is, the faith in the Force. The Force has kind of been, it seems to have been dormant because there are no Jedi, but there are all these people who still believe in the Force. Jin's mother, Chirrut, all of these other people, and the Force is having an impact, even though the Jedi aren't there to wield it, to use its power for good. The Force is still active. I thought that was fascinating to me, and that it's moving in mysterious ways, and it's bringing all these people together that can make a difference, and it's right on the cusp of the return of the Jedi. Obi-Wan Kenobi's about to come back. He's about to start training Luke, and everything is about to change again. I love that this movie doesn't have Jedi in it, but it still has the Force, and I thought that was really fascinating to see the way that the Force is very active through the film, even though it doesn't have a main conduit like an Obi-Wan Kenobi.
So when Chirrut's walking to get the Master Switch, he's believing in the Force. I think he's either tapping or sensing or just, putting his faith into the Force that he can walk there without getting shot. And I thought that was great because for years I've always heard people say, oh, stormtroopers are bad shots. And I used to think, are they? Or is it because our heroes always seem to not get hit by a blaster from stormtroopers because the Force is with them and the Force is working its magic and helping them to avoid getting shot by these stormtroopers because the Force isn't with the stormtroopers. And I thought, is that what's happened with Chirrut too? So I like that part of it because I do feel like the Force is at play. It doesn't mean you have to know how to use the Force to have the Force work. The Force can do it on its own. It has its own agenda.
See, that scene there was one of the only things that I thought something was going to happen and it didn't. When they showed that close-up of the handle that he had to pull, I thought Chirrut was going to pull the lever with the Force. And that's what I wanted to happen. As much as I loved the scene of him going out in the middle of the blaster fire, I wanted him to pull it with the Force. And it kind of made me think, like, because again, I'm not as deeply versed in the expanded universe as you guys. Are these, can Force users be Muggles? Like, can they come from like not having the midichlorians or whatever and like learn the ways of the Force? And I don't know, like, could this guy have studied the Force enough in taking care of these kyber crystals or whatever that he could develop the Force powers? I don't know. Like, I'm not as deep into the extended universe as you guys.
There's
are,
Muggles in Star Wars?
That's
there are, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good question, and even in the visual dictionary, it says seemingly is not Force sensitive. So there's the question of whether, I think that's the question, and I think it's ambiguous on purpose on whether he is truly Force sensitive or not. And I like that. I like that they don't answer the question in that scene. I just thought it was fascinating that the movie is not devoid of the Force. It's still a power that's working throughout the galaxy, even if there aren't Jedi involved. And the idea that even the little scene where they're trying to get into the gate there at Scarif, and Jyn is holding her kyber crystal, and almost and you get the sense that she's praying that they'll get in, and then they get in. The Force is at work because people are actively pursuing it. And I just thought that was an interesting thing in Star Wars. It's a continuation of the whole idea of the Force and how it works, and without the Jedi. So,
and Brandon, I just want to say to your question, when I look at Chirrut, I think that this is just my opinion. I think there are people like him that can sense the Force, but they don't have the abilities or the skills to use the Force.
Like Maz Kanata.
Yes, exactly.
So what did you guys think about the music? Because, this is our first big Star Wars film. I mean, obviously the Clone Wars movie came out, and we had Kevin Kiner do the music for that. What did you think of Michael Giacchino's music here for Rogue One?
I really like it a lot. I'm so pleased that he got into this. I was hoping that if we had a Star Wars movie, he would score one for us. And it's very similar in style to, of course, John Williams' music, but yet different, which is good because this is a different movie from the other Star Wars movies. So I thought it was the right blend. I like the Jyn Erso theme music, which sometimes it sounds, every time it starts off, it reminds me of Across the Stars. That kind of bothers me a little.
Yes.
These first few notes. But I've been listening to the soundtrack several times today, and the more I listen to it, the more I'm loving it. It's not as good as some of the John Williams soundtracks from the other Star Wars movies, in my opinion, but it's close. I like it.
So as the resident music guy here, I don't like Michael Giacchino. He's not my favorite. Like, I like him, but he's not my favorite. And I think his Star Trek music it's good, but it's it's not the greatest, right? But this score I thought was really outstanding. And I loved how he blended some John Williams material in here and how he changed some John Williams material. Like the Star Wars theme, when Rogue One comes up on the screen, it's almost the Star Wars theme, but it's a little different. And right at the end, that last shot of Vader coming up, it's almost the Imperial March, but it's not quite the Imperial March, right? But some of the stuff that I thought that was really cool was when he kind of got into these ethnic beats and whatnot, like that planet that they go to with the mountain that's carved out of that laid down Jedi or whatever it is. Like, there's some really neat tribal drums in that. And same when they get to Jeddah, and that's the shot where it's panning up and you see the Star Destroyer from below. Like, that music at that time is really cool as well. And I think it's a very rich score, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a good score. And I enjoyed it. I think it sounds very much like a Giacchino score, which is not a bad thing. And I thought it was it was nice that it had sort of the trademark Giacchino thing of like a big ship. It reminded me of the beginning of Star Trek 09, where
Yeah.
the big ships are crashing, but then it's this, sort of like gentle music playing, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's sort of his thing, so that's cool. Yeah, it's good, and I enjoyed it, and after I saw it the second time, I listened to it independently, and I like the themes that he developed. It's a good score.
I thought it was nice that he created, he used the Imperial March a little bit, but just when it was Vader, but he actually created his own Imperial sound, which was nice because A New Hope doesn't have, it has its own Imperial music too. So it was almost like it was Krennic's Imperial theme. So I really liked that. And I just enjoyed Jin's theme. I thought it was nice. I actually kind of liked that it referenced just a tiny bit across the stars because it was, I don't know, just something about it worked, especially since her name is, from her dad is Stardust. So it seemed to make sense. And then I love the very last track he put on the suite, the Guardian of the Wills suite. It's just a gorgeous piece of music, and I think he did a good job. To me, it feels like what a lot of the things that we got for the Clone Wars that Kiner would do to create new themes and create new feels. And this movie should feel different. It shouldn't just feel like an episode. When he's really on his game, Kiner does the same thing for Rebels too, especially in season 2. That soundtrack, he created some incredible themes as well. So I think Giacchino does a great job. Last thing I just wanted to ask you guys about, because this movie, it's chock full of stuff, like new looks for things, new things, which is surprising. I mean, U-Wings, the TIE Striker, new Imperial cargo ship, Krennic shuttle, you've got new troopers, death troopers, shore troopers. I mean, all sorts of incredible things. And if that's one thing we had talked about, I know when we talked about The Force Awakens, was the design work didn't seem to be maybe is what we would expect. But I wondered what you guys thought here, because there's so much new stuff.
I like Krennic's shuttle is similar in style with those long wings. Similar to Kylo Ren's ship in The Force Awakens. So to me, it feels like there's a connection with that movie, because there aren't that many connections between those two movies. But I like that we're not just seeing stormtroopers, that we are introduced to other troopers. It makes the galaxy feel bigger and broader to have different ships and different trooper armor, as opposed to A New Hope, where everything kind of looked the same. We had, X-Wings and we had stormtroopers, and that was kind of it. And now we have more depth and various looks and feels of the Empire going on. So that really enriched the universe. I loved it.
Yeah, I like the design work. I did like the Krennic's shuttle seemed to call back to Kylo Ren's. I still don't have any definite evidence that he can't come back as Snoke, so I'm going to hold on to that one. And I mean,
other than the fact that he died on a planet and got...
Did you actually see him die? No, you didn't.
I didn't.
This is Star Wars.
I saw him watch
For
that.
all I know, he
Death
jumped
Star
onto
fire.
a passing TIE defender and got away.
Or there was a cloak.
Wait. No. Well, he did die, John. He did die because, remember, the Death Star hits the top of the...
Did you actually see
Citadel.
him die during that moment? It pulled away to a distant shot. You don't know. He could have, you can't prove it.
Okay.
He
Well, I'll
could
let you
been.
have that one, John.
That's right. A TIE defender.
The
swooped
Eagles
under
are
him and flew
coming.
him
The
away.
Eagles.
Who knows? I like that they had the Scarif troopers, which are basically look like modified biker scouts. I like that the design of the AT-ATs almost seems to make the argument that when you see them again in Empire, it's like they realized what the design flaw was, and they were like, "Yeah, we got to fix that." So I like that, and I just think that in terms of the design stuff, like the fact that the CG has gotten to the point where models and computer graphics are indistinguishable from each other during space battles is just stunning to me. Like, it's just amazing. And I enjoyed it. I thought the designs were good.
There was a lot in this movie that I thought was super cool. Not just the ships, but I mean, Baze's gun I thought was just outstanding. Like, that thing was so cool how it was like, it had that thing, that power pack on his back. I don't know. I thought that was outstanding. Absolutely loved the Mon Calamari Admiral's ship and how they kept doing that look down shot. That was so cool. And I mean, I didn't get that impression from Admiral Akbar's ship in Return of the Jedi, that underneath him was open like that, but he was in the same kind of chair where he was like, he could move around and whatnot. But the fact that it was all glass underneath, I thought was completely epic. There was so much in this movie that called back and fit in the universe to me for design. Like at the end scene when she goes up and she has to realign that dish, and the fact that she had to walk out on that thing hanging way over totally made me think of Bespin, and so like all of this design fits within the Star Wars universe. Well, I told that to my wife. I'm like, that's great. She's like, you like that? I thought that was dumb. I'm like, no, that totally made me think of the battle with Darth Vader and Luke and Bespin. And she's like, you know what? You're right. Because it's just such a weird, ludicrous design, but it fits in the Star Wars universe. It's beautiful.
I love all the new stuff. I mean, I've never wanted to be in the 501st, but those shore troopers make me want to be in the 501st. I mean, those things are sharp. I just loved, those are the first stormtroopers for me that I just absolutely love. I don't know why. Something about them, just love. I thought the Death Troopers were really cool. Krennic's Special Forces. Those guys reminded me also of the Breen, because apparently when they talk, you can't really understand what they're saying. It's like their own special language, which was really creepy. I loved the U-Wing. I thought that was a great design. The TIE Striker was really cool. The idea that they have a TIE fighter that's really just meant for being an atmosphere. I like the new Imperial cargo ship. I think the thing I like here is that they realized in ship design, things looking, having symmetry to them is really important. So Krennic's shuttle to me was the angular design of it. It was gorgeous. I just thought it was the coolest thing. It really stood out to me. And then having old ships like, the X-Wings look fantastic. The Star Destroyers looked phenomenal. The Ghost in the movie and having the Hammerhead ships from Rebels. Nice call. That was awesome. And seeing two Star Destroyers, like you said, John, smash together and just rip the top off, it was just phenomenal.
Okay, so I didn't really buy that much damage. So the one Hammerhead bumps into the other one and pushes the other one and completely cuts that ship in half. I didn't buy that much damage would occur. I would have just expected it to bump into the other Star Destroyer and push it along. I don't know.
They had
what you
their
guys think of
shields
that?
down.
I don't care. That's what it comes down to. It looked cool. Who cares?
Yeah,
It did look cool. It did look awesome. That one ship though looked like a turtle to me. I loved it. Like that transport ship and how the four big paddles came down.
Yeah.
It made me think of a turtle.
You're absolutely right.
Maybe it's the T-Wing.
But
the T-Wing.
The T-Wing, the turtle wing. But what are those that other outfit too, where they were on Endor and they were white, right? And they had the kind of the goggle look on their helmet.
Biker Scouts.
And in this one they were, which one?
Biker Scouts. And then here
in this one they were brown.
Yeah, the Scarif Troopers, or I think Matt called them also by
they're the shore
troopers.
troopers.
Beach troopers or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But if they're beach troopers, they should have shorts on. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, like jams.
Right. Yes.
Like, why aren't they
board
wearing
shorts.
jams?
They should have board shorts, and they should surf into every fight.
It'd be awesome.
And floral
It would be awesome.
patterns on their uniforms.
I'd go see the movie again if they did that.
That's the special edition. Okay. Well, I think with that, it's a perfect time to ask you guys about your ratings for Rogue One. So, Brandon, your first time on the show. Let's do out of 10 Rogue One.
I love this movie. I had a blast watching it. Like I said at the beginning, I have not left a theater this excited in a decade. This was absolutely fantastic. There was so many wonderful callbacks, and it was done in I feel, some kind of a different way that I'm still trying to work out, where they didn't bother me. Like the callouts in Star Trek Beyond, I found annoying watching that movie. It was like every word they said and every shot they took in that movie referenced something else in Star Trek, and it was just too much. And this one had a nice balance for me. Honestly, I think that this is probably my favorite Star Wars movie out of all of them. Like, I really loved this movie, and I watched it 3 times, and my enjoyment has not yet gone down. Now, I personally think that people loved Star Trek Beyond and The Force Awakens so much because Star Trek Beyond wasn't Into Darkness and because The Force Awakens wasn't the prequel trilogy. So I think that they lifted up a little bit too much because they were so disappointed with what came before it. So I'm cognizant that I may be doing the same thing right now, right? Because I didn't like The Force Awakens that much. But right now, it is my favorite Star Wars movie. And I'm going to give this movie 9 out of 10 Kyber crystals.
What do you think, John?
I'm not going to get... I'm going to be the one that refuses to give it a score. And I'm simply going to say that my metric for this is that I enjoyed it. I've seen it more than once. I will probably see it again in a different format just to, so I can compare and contrast. And because I would be legitimately interested to see how the final battle plays in 3D, especially with IMAX laser projection. But I think it's worth seeing, and there you go. Like, I think it's worth going out and trekking to the theater and seeing, and it's a good time. And I think that the level at which somebody's going to like it is going to vary, depending on, all of the various different factors and everything. I think that I will be very interested to continue reading things like the oral history that just came out on Empire about the making of the movie, knowing that, for instance, like the trailers contain, I could have watched this trailer and had Zippy spoiled, at this point, I question my blackout because I'm like, well, I guess if I'd watched continued watching things, maybe I wouldn't have seen anything still, but it's a good time and it's enjoyable and it is, it's a good movie. It's worth seeing.
It's so hard for me sometimes to rate movies because there's different ratings for different situations. I love this movie, but it's not Best Picture of the Year at the Academy Awards. It's not. So I'm not going to compare it to other movies. I'm not going to compare it to other sci-fi movies. I'm just going to kind of keep it within the context of Star Wars and how I felt about this movie. And I think I came out of there liking it more than I thought I would. And, when I heard not The Force Awakens, when I heard that Rogue One was being developed, I thought, oh, what a shame that, they can't really have Tarkin in it. Well, maybe they'll have like a transmission from Tarkin. There'll be like this one little scene where we'll see like a holographic image of Tarkin that's CGI or whatever. But the fact that not only did we have Tarkin in the movie, he was a prominent character in several scenes. And we've come so far in our technology, and it's only going to get better to create characters like this that from actors who have passed on or not available or whatever. So there's just so many elements of this that tied all the different movies and this whole franchise together. And it's my favorite of the standalone films. And yes, I'm counting Caravan of Courage and the Battle of Endor.
Yeah, your scale's real interesting there, Bruce. You're mentioning Aftermath and then the Ewok movies.
No, but all seriousness though. So for me, just coming out of there, it felt like 9.5 Vader masks out of 10. There's one mask that broke.
That one fell on the floor and he choked somebody for it. So
yeah,
one of his acolytes was dusting in it. Yeah. I came out of this movie and I loved it. And then I'll just be honest that for me personally, you can take my rating with a grain of salt if you want, but it hit every button that I had for Star Wars films and what I want from a new Star Wars film. And, there's been the rumor that Gareth Edwards would love to do a Kenobi movie. So please give him that movie as soon as possible because I would love to see what he would do with that. I think he understands Star Wars. I think he understands the history, what we love about it. And I think he created a movie that I just didn't expect. I'm with you, Bruce. I didn't expect it to be this good. I thought it was going to be good. I just didn't think it would be this good. I was just utterly floored that it really is this good. And he's created so many different things, I feel like, just like Star Wars does when it's at its best, that I just want to know more about now, you know? Like, he answered lots of questions, but now I have like 30,000 more. And I'm just so excited about this, and I hope people will go see it, and that they'll love it as much as I do. And if they are like, you know, like Brandon or others where they haven't seen as much of Star Wars, they're like, oh, well, there's this Saul character, and I heard he's in other things, that they'll go find all of those new things and experience those, like the Clone Wars or the Catalyst Leave-In novel, which is just fantastic and does a great job of giving you more backstory on Galen and Krennic and Lyra and everything that's going on with the Death Star. It's just wonderful. This is Star Wars, I think, at this point where I want it at its best. Filling in the details. I mean, at this point, you know, you add more to Star Wars at this point, really, you know, the biggest chances you're going to really screw it up and just like make something worse somewhere. And this doesn't do that whatsoever. In fact, it enhances and it does change the way that I view A New Hope now completely, and it does it in a good way. And that's a phenomenal statement to be able to say. So for me, this is definitely 9.5 out of 10 U-Wings crashed on a planet, because they crash a lot. Maybe that's why they're not in any of the rest of the Star Wars movies. They used them all up. But thank you guys so much for joining me here in the last episode of 2016 for the 602 Club. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that comes as a guest on this show and spends the time and the money to either see a film or sit down and watch a movie or a TV series. I honestly, I can't do this show without you guys. And I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, how much I've appreciated this last year, spending so much time with so many of you that have been on the show. And for all of you listening, thank you so much. We have the best listeners, and just thank you so much for sticking with us, being with us. We have a great year coming up for you in 2017, so I hope you'll enjoy it. On that, you know, this network itself, Trek FM, it does cost a lot of money to do this. And that means we can't do it without your help. So I hope that you'll go over to patreon.com/TrekFM and see throughout the next year how you can make sure all of the content keeps coming to you each and every week. We have some great associate producers through Patreon here, Ken Tripp and Davis Grayson, Norman Lau. These guys have been with me from almost the very beginning. And I appreciate their support so much in making sure the 602 Club keeps coming to each and every week and everything else. So again, go over to patreon.com/TrekFM and see how just a little bit every month makes sure that all the shows keep coming to you. Now, gentlemen, again, my heartfelt thanks for you spending the time to go see the movie and come on the show and talk about it with me. Brandon, before we get out of here, Ruby is literally kicking me out right now. Where can we find you online and on the network?
Well, you can find me here on the network with new episodes of Melodic Treks, which is all about the music of Star Trek, and I tend to expand a little bit on it. We got lots of great interviews there. You can also find me on many recent new episodes of Warp 5, which is our Enterprise podcast, and that's been a lot of fun. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon-Mutala, and every once in a while I poke my head up in the Babel conference. I've also been helping out quite a bit with the actual Patreon stuff. So at the $15 a month level, just so you guys know, you can join us once a month for a special roundtable episode, and that's going to get released in our master feed, so other people can listen to you talk about Star Trek. Plus, we're doing some exclusive bonus content on there. Plus, early releases have been happening. It's a lot of fun, so we hope to see you there on Patreon. And thanks very much for having me on here. It was a lot of fun talking about Rogue One.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being on your first 602 episode. This is fantastic. Bruce, where can we find you online, and what else have you got going on?
Thanks for having me on the show. It encouraged me to go see this movie. So you can find...
Well, I knew you weren't going to see it unless I told you to.
I had no desire to go see it at all. Yeah, not at all. You can find me here on the network at Trek FM on Literary Treks with Matt and Dan, even though Matt just did his last show. We just recently released that as co-host, but He'll be on occasionally. And also, I'm on the Star Wars Report podcast, where we'll be talking about what we just talked about on the show. But you'll hear different opinions because there'll be different people. And you can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. And I'm poking around the Babel Conference myself.
And my friend and Jedi Master, Mr. Mills, where can we find you?
Kessel Junkie Online. You can find me on Trek FM, co-hosting Stage 9 with Mike Schindler. You can find me co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig. You can find me over on the Nerd Party Network, co-hosting Aggressive Negotiations with you, Matt, and also co-hosting Great Shot Kid with Mike Schindler. So, and when I'm not doing that, I'm sleeping.
And I highly encourage that if you haven't checked out Aggressive Negotiations or Great Shot Kid, they're really fun Star Wars podcasts. So go over to thenerdparty.com, do yourself a favor, and check both of them out because you're going to love them. And
I endorse that.
Yeah, I'm on one of them, but yeah, check out both of them anyway. I don't let that keep you from it. You can find me here on the network. I'm doing The Orb with Chris Jones, and we're all praying that Chris will be able to recover soon, so we'll have new episodes. But I appreciate everybody allowing us the time for that to happen for Chris, and we hope that in 2017 to be back. And you can find me on Twitter at MattRushing02, and of course you can find the 602 Club has a special Star Wars feed, Star Wars, a 602 Club collection. It just keeps all the Star Wars episodes in one place. That's on iTunes as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and may the Force be with you.